What really lurked in the depths of prehistoric oceans? What strange and terrifying creatures inhabited these primitive waters? Millions of years ago, the seas teemed with life, but not as we know it today. In the dark waters of the Cambrian, giant multi-eyed predators stalked their prey. The warm waters of the Jurassic were home to sea monsters as tall as buildings, whose jaws could crush a modern ship in two. These ancient oceans harbored secrets that we are only just beginning to understand. Enigmatic fossils emerge from the rocks, offering us a glimpse of a world long gone. But with each discovery, new questions arise. Dear traveler, welcome. Today we're off to explore the murky waters of the past, where danger and wonder await us at every turn. But before we set off on a new adventure, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss a thing. Thank you and have a great trip! Today, our knowledge of space is more immense than ever. We have discovered over 5,600 exoplanets in more than 4,200 planetary systems. We have mapped the observable universe, a sphere stretching 93 billion light-years in diameter. And yet, our knowledge of our own planet is still far from complete. Our oceans are still a real mystery to us. We have explored just 5% of them and mapped less than a quarter. In other words, we know more about space than we do about our planet's oceans and seas. And yet, the oceans cover 71% of the Earth's surface. Researchers estimate that 50 to 80% of the world's species are found underwater. To date, we know only 220,000 marine species out of the 1 million estimated by scientists. Marine species represent only 12.5% of all known species. In other words, 1 to 2/3 of marine species have yet to be discovered. Why is this so? Exploring the seabed presents many challenges. The first challenge facing scientists is depth. The deepest trench lies at 11,000 meters or 36,000 feet. By comparison, the highest peak on Earth rises to 9,000 meters or 30,000 feet. At a depth of 200 meters or 700 feet, it's pitch black. What's more, human beings can't breathe naturally underwater, let alone at such depths. Nor can they cope with the pressure of the water, which is added to that of the atmosphere. At a depth of 10 meters, underwater pressure is twice that of the atmosphere. For a long time, all these obstacles prevented us from studying marine biodiversity. It was only in 1940 that oceanographers began to take an interest in the depths of our oceans. In 1960, Swiss oceanographer Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh achieved the feat of reaching the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Aboard the Trieste, it took them 4 hours 30 minutes to reach the deepest part of the Earth's crust. Billions of years have passed since the formation of the oceans. Underwater flora and fauna have evolved. 500 million years ago, our oceans were very different from what they are today. There were no coral reefs, no marine mammals, and no cetaceans. On this journey, we're going to find out what our seabed looked like 500 million years ago, and how it evolved to become what it is today. To do this, we're going to explore the depths of prehistoric seas and oceans. We'll meet the animals that populated the seas from the Cambrian to the appearance of the first humans 7 million years ago in the Miocene. It's an exciting journey that takes us deep into the abyss of our blue planet. Are you ready to embark on this extraordinary dive? The journey begins now. But first, let's answer another question. When did the oceans appear? How did animals get to the bottom of the sea? Since 1999, we've known that water was already present in large quantities on Earth 4.5 billion years ago. It was the discovery of a small piece of zircon crystal in Australia that enabled us to find out. To crystallize, this mineral needs water in its liquid state. This zircon has been dated at 4.4 billion years old. In fact, it's the oldest terrestrial object known to date. But that doesn't tell us how or when water first appeared on Earth. In fact, scientists have yet to agree on an explanation for the origin of water on Earth. Many hypotheses have been put forward, but two in particular are favored by researchers. According to the first, the Earth's water was released in the form of water vapor, either by a bombardment of meteorites and comets or by sudden volcanic outgassing. The water vapor then condensed to form a thick layer of cloud. This thick cloud layer caused torrential rains over several million years, leading to the creation of the oceans. According to the second hypothesis, the Earth was subjected to an intense bombardment of meteorites during its formation. These meteorites probably came from outside the asteroid belt. More precisely, they were ice comets and asteroids similar to water-rich chondrites. In other words, waterlogged extraterrestrial debris. Logically, when these meteorites disintegrated on collision with the Earth, they released water. Collision after collision, oceans were formed. At present, the second hypothesis seems the most likely. Based on the age of the zircons, geologist Stephen Moses has estimated that the oceans took around 150 million years to form. In other words, 150 million years after its formation, the Earth already had oceans. But these oceans were far from resembling our present-day stretches of blue water. Saturated with iron, they were not blue like today's oceans, but green. Since their creation, oceans have constantly evolved, changed, and disappeared, only to reform again under the effect of plate tectonics. One of the best known is the vast Panthalassa Ocean, which began to form 900 million years ago from the Greek for all seas. This gigantic ocean was formed by the breakup of the supercontinent known as Rodinia. Between 650 and 550 million years ago, a new supercontinent took shape, Pannotia. Shortly afterwards, it was split into four masses, which reunited to form a single continent, Pangaea. Around Pangaea, the Panthalassa divided into two basins, the Pacific Basin, which corresponds to today's Pacific Ocean, and the Paleotethys Basin. Later, when the Pangaea broke up, new ocean basins would appear, giving rise to the present-day Arctic and Antarctic basins. The Tethys underwent a series of subductions and oceanic rifts. All that remains of this prehistoric basin is the Mediterranean Sea. The oceans would therefore have arisen gradually over a relatively short period in the Earth's history, following a bombardment of water-bearing meteorites on our primitive planet. Over the billions of years that followed, they were profoundly modified by tectonic movements to form the oceans we know today. We're now going back in time to the Cambrian, a very interesting period from the point of view of marine biology. On the geological timescale, the Cambrian is the first period of the Primary Era, or Paleozoic. This period began 540 million years ago, marking the start of the Fossiliferous Era. The Cambrian is a particularly important period in the history of life. It was marked by an explosion in biodiversity, with the appearance of numerous forms of animal life. During the Cambrian, the supercontinent known as Pannotia broke up to form several continental masses. These new continents drifted northwards until they reached the equator, a less cold region more conducive to the development of life. They begin to break up, creating numerous shallow seas around the landmasses. It was in these shallow tropical seas, ideal for the appearance and diversification of life, that the so-called Cambrian explosion took place. At the beginning of the Cambrian, most of today's major invertebrate groups were present: mollusks, worms, sponges, arthropods. These animals had to adapt to their new environment. To survive, they developed shells, skeletons, and carapaces. This is how, for the first time in the history of life on Earth, they were able to leave fossils. The appearance of the first marine animal skeletons is certainly the most significant event of the Cambrian. Without fossils, we would not have been able to reconstruct the underwater life of this period. Two fossil-rich sites were particularly useful in helping us learn more about Cambrian underwater animals: Burgess in Canada and Shenzhen in China. In Canada, the Burgess Marine Trough lies at the heart of Yoho National Park, on the western slope of Mount Stephen. Discovered in 1909 by British paleontologist Charles Doolittle Walcott, the Burgess Trough is an extremely well-preserved nursery of fossilized marine animals. It contains some 65,000 fossil specimens, belonging to 120 different species. The fossils in what is now known as the Burgess fauna are of remarkable quality for fossils of this age. Slowly decomposed, quickly buried, these fossils tell us that the Cambrian was the scene of an explosion of underwater life. Or, as we now know, the explosion of underwater life began before the Cambrian, but animals didn't have the skeletons to fossilize themselves. Let's go back in time and dive into the heart of the Cambrian seas to meet the marine animals of that distant era. Invertebrates populated most of the warm, shallow seas. Worms, mollusks, echinoderms, and sponges were all to be found on the Cambrian seabed. Marine arthropods were particularly numerous. While most animal groups present at this time have survived to the present day, trilobites and radiodonts have not. During the Paleozoic, from the Cambrian to the Permian, trilobites were abundant in prehistoric seas. They disappeared 250 million years ago, during the Permian Triassic crisis. And yet, these little animals had what it takes to survive. Their multifaceted eyes could see 360 degrees. A real asset for feeding at the bottom of the sea, but also for escaping predators. Yohoia tenuis is another marine arthropod that appeared in the Cambrian, and whose fossil is found in the Burgess Trough. Ranging in size from 7 to 23 millimeters, it lived on sandy, muddy bottoms. It was unique in that it had a cranial shield and 13 plates called tergites, which formed a kind of carapace. This little invertebrate is a good example of a Cambrian innovation, the articulated skeleton. During this period, arthropod skeletons began to be organized into different segments, covering and protecting certain parts of the body. Depending on the specimen, these segments had important roles to play: walking, breathing, chewing, grasping. We'll now turn our attention to another group of marine animals that appeared during the Cambrian, the archaeocyathans. They were the first reef-building marine organisms. Archaeocyathea were not corals but calcareous sponges. They filter-fed on zooplankton, phytoplankton, and suspended particles. But they were very fragile organisms, unable to withstand changes in temperature, salinity, and depth, and so disappeared fairly quickly. You're looking at the largest predator of the Cambrian, the Anomalocaris canadensis. This super predator is almost a meter long. Its name means strange shrimp. Its sharp-edged mouth enables it to crush even shellfish. During the Cambrian, our planet's underwater fauna was completely remodeled. New anatomical forms and new species appeared. By the end of the Cambrian, all of today's animal phyla were already present, plus other orders of animals that are now extinct. The transition from the Cambrian to the Ordovician was marked by a mass extinction, certainly linked to global cooling of the planet, which caused a reduction in the oxygenation rate of marine environments. This freed up ecological niches, leaving room for new species to thrive. The diversification of marine life thus continued into the Ordovician period. Although the Ordovician is less well known than the Cambrian for the diversification of its fauna, this period also witnessed an explosion in underwater diversity. On the geological timescale, the Ordovician extends from around 485 to 443 million years ago. After the Cambrian crisis, the depths of the Earth's oceans witnessed an intense diversification of species. Many groups of underwater animals were already present in the Cambrian, but really developed and diversified in the Ordovician. Articulated brachiopods, cephalopods, crinoids, astropods, graptolites, conodonts, corals. The first coral reefs were formed during this period. At the same time, new species appeared, such as agnathans and ectoprots. The number of marine animal genera tripled or even quadrupled. By Ordovician time, 12% of the Paleozoic fauna was already present. At the beginning of the Ordovician, sea levels were higher than in the Cambrian. Temperatures rose, averaging 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit worldwide. One of the richest fossil sites for the Ordovician period is in France, in the Hérault region. It is the Cabrières site. Discovered in 2018 and studied in 2023, over 400 fossils dating back 470 million years have been found. These fossils, particularly well preserved, testify to the major role played by algae and sponges at that time. Above all, they show that the Ordovician was a very rich period in terms of biology. We're going to dive into the seas of the Ordovician to get to know the most striking species of this geological period. Among the underwater animals that appeared during the Ordovician period was Lepetognathus fluctivagus, a primitive fish from the now extinct conodont family. Thanks to the fossils found of this primitive fish, scientists have been able to reconstruct its appearance. Lepetognathus fluctivagus resembled an eel, with a soft body and teeth. These teeth were mainly used as filters to feed on plankton. Lepetognathus fluctivagus was not a predator. The first ectoprots also appeared in the Ordovician period. We call them moss animals. These animals attach themselves to an element that doesn't move, such as a rock, and live there in colonies. They are said to be sessile. Each individual is called a zooid and lives in a small limestone lodge. When placed end to end, these lodges form colonies. Ectoprocts are often confused with corals, but they are two very different species. Corals were already present in the Cambrian, but did not yet form vast reefs. The first coral reefs appeared in the Ordovician period. It was also during this period that bivalves, mollusks made up of two shells called valves joined by a flexible ligament, began to diversify extensively. Among the best-known bivalves of this period is the Maudiolopsis, recognizable by its elongated shape. Like bivalves, gastropods developed during the Ordovician period. This species of mollusk can be recognized by its univalve, twisted dorsal shell. Some individuals, such as Chippewa, resembled underwater snails. Unlike bivalves and gastropods, orthocerans grew to enormous sizes. The shell of the giant orthoceran could reach 10 meters. These cephalopods, similar to octopus or a giant squid, were formidable predators. Orthoceras had poor eyesight but an excellent sense of smell. After spotting their prey, they used their tentacles to catch it before devouring it with their beaks. Although vertebrates were rarer, they developed considerably in the seas of the Ordovician period. Among the new species were fish of the genus Agnathus, so called because they had no jaws. These fish dominated the seas of the Ordovician period, but because they were fragile, they quickly disappeared and no longer exist today. At the end of the Ordovician, around 450 million years ago, a period of intense glaciation marked the first major extinction in Earth's history. This period of glaciation led to a drop in sea level, greatly reducing the habitat available to underwater creatures. Basins became isolated from one another, and waters became depleted of oxygen. Rising CO2 levels soon trigger a rise in temperature and a period of deglaciation. Sea levels rise, and underwater animals have to adapt to new habitats. This leads to a second peak in extinction. In all, between 60 and 80% of marine species disappeared at the end of the Ordovician period. This represents more than a quarter of all underwater animal families and over half of all genera. This biodiversity crisis marks the end of the Ordovician and the beginning of the Silurian, which spans the period from 443 to 419 million years ago. During the Silurian, the climate was mild but unstable, and sea levels very high. In the first half of the Silurian, sea levels rise before beginning to fall again. Seas are warm and shallow, leading to heavy storms. After the mass extinction of the late Ordovician, the Silurian appears to be a period of recovery for marine biodiversity. Life was abundant in the seas and oceans of Europe and Northeast America. Species already present during the Ordovician period continue to populate the oceans. Mollusks, graptolites, echinoderms. Graptolites suffered greatly from the Ordovician extinction, but recovered their diversity during the Silurian. Fish diversified and developed mobile scales. Brachiopods and crinoids also diversified. Corals thrive in warm Silurian seas and continue to form reefs. Although the diversification of Silurian marine species remains low compared to the great diversification of the Ordovician, the Silurian also sees the appearance of new species. One of the key events of this period was the appearance of the first jawed fish. Acanthodians were the first representatives of the Osteichthyes family, the first bony fish. These gnathostomes, or jawed vertebrates, are nicknamed spiny sharks. But in reality, they are not the ancestors of our present-day sharks. Acanthodians can be recognized by their small ventral spines which support their fins. They are also covered with diamond-shaped bony scales. Placoderms were also among the first jawed vertebrates. Unlike acanthodians, which were no more than 50 centimeters long, placoderms were large fish, with some individuals exceeding 8 meters in length. Their powerful jaws enabled them to crush even the toughest fish. Placoderms are often referred to as armored fish, as they have a thick bony armor on their head and thorax. These plates have evolved to protect them from attacks by marine predators, but also from their fellow fish. They protect their vital organs: eyes, heart, brain. New Silurian species also include eurypterids, marine scorpions, some of which can reach several meters in length. Although they first appeared in the Ordovician, it was in the Silurian that they developed and prospered. Around 419 million years ago, the Silurian gave way to the Devonian, a period that lasted until 372 million years ago. During the Devonian, the climate was warm, with temperatures hovering around 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. During the Silurian, vegetation developed considerably on the continents. Photosynthesis caused carbon dioxide levels to fall. This vegetation continued to evolve during the Devonian, when small plants gave way to the beginnings of forests. As forests develop, temperatures will slowly cool. But this cooling was short-lived. At the very end of the Devonian, temperatures rose back to their early period levels. Consequences of this warm climate: there are no glaciers or polar ice caps, and sea levels are high. At the beginning of the Devonian, marine fauna was dominated by ectoprots, corals, and brachiopods. Stromatoporoids, aquatic reef-building invertebrates, work to develop coral reefs. The reefs will grow, diversify, and welcome new species. Armorfish also proliferate in Devonian waters. New species appear, soon to dethrone giant eurypterids as the most dangerous marine predators. Among the most feared predators is the Dunkleosteus, a cartilaginous fish of the placoderm class. This enormous fish can measure up to 4 meters or 13 feet in length. But it's not its size that makes it such a feared predator. It's the power of its bite. According to some researchers, the Dunkleosteus had a bite power superior to that of any fish or shark, including the great white shark. It could exert a pressure of up to 55 megapascals, so it could rival the Tyrannosaurus rex or today's crocodiles. But that's not all. It could open its mouth in 1/50th of a second, and was probably cannibalistic. Fearsome as they were, these predators were soon to disappear. They have not been found in the fossil record of the next era, the Carboniferous. In the Devonian, trilobites are still common, but less diverse than in the Cambrian, Ordovician, or Silurian. New forms of ammonites appeared, although these cephalopod mollusks did not become truly abundant until the Mesozoic. The Devonian also saw the appearance of the first sharks and fish with bones. While fossils of shark-like animals have been dated to the Ordovician, the first recognizable traces of sharks date from the mid-Devonian. The first group identified as the ancestor of today's sharks was Cladocelidae. At the end of the Devonian, a mass extinction led to the disappearance of 75% of all species on Earth. The cause remains unknown. Oceanic anoxia, volcanic peak, meteorite impact, climate cooling. What we do know is that this event benefited sharks. It enabled them to develop and then dominate the next period, the Carboniferous. The Carboniferous extends from 359 to 299 million years ago. Temperatures remained warm and stable during the first part of the period, then the climate continued to cool, initiating an era of glaciation that lasted until the beginning of the Permian. Global levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide are very high by today's standards, but the emergence of forests will help reduce CO2 levels during the Carboniferous. This is also certainly the cause of global cooling. It was during the Carboniferous period that the continental masses coalesced into a new supercontinent, Pangaea. Pangaea was formed by the collision of several continental blocks, Gondwana, and smaller continental blocks. This collision led to the formation of an immense mountain chain that crossed Pangaea from east to west. Today, its remnants form the Ural Mountains, the Ardennes, the Massif Central, and the Vosges. In the north of Pangaea, the climate is tropical, conducive to the development of wetlands teeming with life. In the seas and oceans, it seems that calm has returned. The Devonian superpredators have disappeared. They have been replaced by other predators, the ammonites, which feed on small marine animals such as mollusks and crustaceans. The arthropod family, which flourished in previous eras, is now in decline. Trilobites, so numerous in the Cambrian, have become rare, but other underwater species are enjoying a real boom. Coral reefs are proliferating, encouraging the development of brachiopods, echinoderms, and mollusks, which are abundant in warm seas. Crinoids, part of the echinoderms, are abundant. These marine animals resemble plants, hence their name, which means sea lily. The crown of the crinoid's limestone skeleton, with its many arms, is a refuge for species of marine animals such as gastropods. These arms also enable them to feed by filtering plankton. Chondrichthyans, i.e. rays, chimeras, and sharks also flourished. The first sharks develop and soon dominate the Carboniferous seas. The Helicoprion, Bessanovi, is one of the most impressive, with its circular saw-like jaw. Sthethocanthus are just as frightening, with their anvil-like dorsal fin. We don't know whether this fin had a defensive function or was part of a seduction strategy. What we do know is that Sthethocanthus was one of the first cartilaginous fish in Earth's history, like Cladocelidae and Gladbacus, both of which appeared in the Devonian period. Like sharks, ray-finned fish, or Arctinopterygians, appeared in the Devonian but really flourished in the Carboniferous, having survived the mass extinction of the late Devonian. Ray-finned fish are so called because their fins are supported by rays. This group of fish still exists today, and is particularly diverse. There are around 30,000 different species, far more than mammals, which number just 6,500. We are now in the Permian, the last period of the Paleozoic era, which lasted from 299 million to 251 million years ago. The temperature is temperate, around 18 degrees Celsius or 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Throughout this period, sea levels remained fairly low. During the Permian, the Tethys, a paleo-ocean that crosses Pangaea from east to west, begins to open up. This marked the beginning of the rifting process that would gradually break up Pangaea. As in the Carboniferous, underwater life is dominated by mollusks, echinoderms, and brachiopods. Imposing reefs continue to be built, driven by colonial or solitary corals and sponges. The Permian saw the appearance of giant sponges that could reach 2 meters. Brachiopods flourished. Some species developed spines on their shells. Cephalopod mollusks such as goniotites and nautiloids were also abundant. Nautiloids are no longer as diverse as they were during the Ordovician and Devonian periods, but this mollusk group continues to evolve. Most nautiloids have a simple, planispiral shape, but some species stand out, such as Cooperaceras texanum, whose shell was covered with spine. Trilobites decline sharply. Only one family remains. They disappeared for good during the crisis at the end of the Permian. Cartilaginous fish and bony fish with radiating fins continue to thrive, as do bony fish with fleshy fins, such as the coelacanths. Some species of cartilaginous fish closely resemble today's sharks, with their increasingly developed sensory organs and powerful jaws. The hybidus, for example, was a feared predator. It could reach 2 meters or 7 feet in length, and could hunt many types of prey, fish, and other marine animals. Orthocanthus is another example of a primitive shark with sharp teeth. The Permian also saw the appearance of the oldest known aquatic reptile, the mosasaur. The mosasaur resembled a crocodile, although the two species are not actually related. It can be recognized by its elongated snout, with numerous tapered teeth, long neck, and long undulating tail. Mosasaurs fed on small prey such as crustaceans. Perhaps their sharp teeth also enabled them to filter plankton. Amphibians, whose first specimens appeared in the Carboniferous period, developed in the Permian. They range in size from a few centimeters to 10 meters, or 30 feet, depending on the species. Among the Permian amphibians were the Temnospondyli, tetrapods that were among the first vertebrates fully adapted to life on land. Whether or not Temnospondyli were the ancestors of modern amphibians is still a matter of debate. Whether they were or not, the first amphibians did not resemble today's amphibians, such as anarans or salamanders. They were endowed with physical features such as scales, claws, and bony plates, which have now disappeared. The end of the Permian is approaching. The marine species we have discovered will soon face the greatest biological crisis of all time, the Permian-Triassic extinction. The reduction in sea level caused by the formation of Pangaea will trigger chain reactions that will have an unprecedented impact on underwater fauna. At the end of the Permian, sea level dropped by 250 meters, or 820 feet. Waters are shallow, stagnant, and warm. They are poorly oxygenated, which is unfavorable for animal life. warm currents around the South Pole and rising CO2 levels in the atmosphere will melt the polar cap. Intense volcanic eruptions follow, enriching the atmosphere with even more CO2. The combination of CO2 and greenhouse gases causes intense global warming. Ocean temperatures rise. The Permian-Triassic crisis will be the deadliest in Earth's history. 90% of marine species, 75% of vertebrates, and almost all primitive amphibians will disappear. This marked the beginning of a new geological era, the Mesozoic, between 251 and 66 million years ago. The Paleozoic marked a turning point in the history of marine biology, with the appearance of fossiliferous species. The Mesozoic saw the appearance of new animal species such as mammals and birds, which are still present today. The Mesozoic also saw the appearance of dinosaurs and angiosperms, plants capable of producing flowers and fruit. These plants had an unprecedented impact on the Earth's ecosystem. It was also during the Mesozoic that Pangaea broke up, giving rise first to two continents, then to the continents we know today. The Earth would differentiate into several climatic zones: tropical, temperate, or dry and arid. Seasons would be more pronounced. Underwater fauna will have to adapt to these new conditions. The Mesozoic is divided into three periods: Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. The Triassic period spans almost 50 million years, between 251 and 201 million years ago. This period was marked by several major events: the appearance of the first dinosaurs and the breakup of Pangaea at the end of the Triassic. At the beginning of the Triassic period, the Earth was devastated. It had just been hit by the greatest biological crisis in its history. For 1 million years, intense volcanic eruptions succeeded one another, releasing huge quantities of toxic gases into the atmosphere and oceans. Deprived of oxygen, the oceans were seriously affected. 95% of marine life disappeared. At the beginning of the Triassic period, the temperature was 19 degrees Celsius, or 66 degrees Fahrenheit. 4 degrees Celsius, or 7 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than today. The climate is hot and dry. Slowly, life returns, especially in tropical areas. The ocean is trying to rebuild the coral reefs that are home to a large proportion of underwater species. During the Permian-Triassic crisis, tetracorals were largely wiped out. These solitary corals, abundant in Ordovician seas, did not survive the biological crisis. Little by little, exocorals will take their place and rebuild the reefs. The few species that survived the Permian-Triassic crisis will take advantage of this to occupy the ecological niches left vacant. The Mesozoic is sometimes referred to as the Age of Reptiles. In fact, reptiles began to thrive as early as the Triassic period. They took advantage of the disappearance of the placoderms, formidable predators of the Paleozoic seas, to conquer the seas. The unique oceans surrounding Pangaea and its inland sea, the Tethys, filled up with marine predators. From the beginning of the Triassic, two main groups appeared and began to diversify: ichthyosaurs and sauropterygians. Ichthyosaurs vary in size depending on the species. They can measure from less than a meter to more than 20 meters or 66 feet. Their name literally means fish reptiles, but they are also known as sea dragons. Similar in appearance to dolphins, although not related, ichthyosaurs have large eyes that probably enable them to see in the dark, in the depths of the ocean. Very fast, they fed on fish and mollusks. As for the sauropterygians, they flourished during the Triassic period, but almost all became extinct by the end of this period. Their name means finned lizards. Their best-known representatives are the plesiosaurs, the only ones to have survived to the end of the Triassic, and the pliosaurs. In just a few million years, ichthyosaurs and sauropterygians achieved the feat of morphologically and physiologically transforming themselves to adapt to the constraints of marine life. Their bodies took on a hydrodynamic shape, and their limbs were transformed into flattened, rigid swimming paddles. Soon, marine reptiles dominated the seabed. Ichthyosaurs had to share the seabed with another predatory reptile, Nothosaurus. Its name means mixed lizard. It resembles a long-necked lizard, with very fine, sharp teeth and webbed feet adapted to swimming. Like today's seals, Nothosaurus is semi-aquatic. It spends much of its time underwater, where it hunts fish and occasionally other marine animals, but lives outside the water, on beaches, where it rests and lays its eggs. Out of the water, it is the prey of dinosaurs, but in the water, it is one of the main predators. Here's a Cerasiasaurus calcagni, another reptile that populated the Triassic seas. It's one of the largest Triassic vertebrates, with a very long neck. As you can see, this reptile had no toes at all, only flippers. An excellent swimmer, it was very fast in the water. All these reptiles live alongside fish, sharks, echinoderms such as sea urchins and starfish, as well as cephalopod and bivalve mollusks. Ammonites and sea urchins, like reptiles, have benefited from the reworking of the seabed to diversify and proliferate. As we approach the end of the Triassic, new changes are taking place. Shifting tectonic plates fractured the oceanic crust from east to west, separating Pangaea into two blocks, Laurasia to the north, Gondwana to the south. At the end of the Triassic, just as Pangaea began to fracture, a new biological crisis wiped out 20% of marine biodiversity, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. Once again, this crisis led to the diversification of certain species that took advantage of the ecological niches left vacant. On the continents, dinosaurs and mammals underwent an unprecedented radiation. From 201 million years ago, a new period began, the Jurassic. It lasted until 145 million years ago. During this period, Pangaea continued to break up. The Atlantic and Indian Oceans opened up. America drifted westwards, and the rest of the continents moved northwards. Africa, Arabia, and India moved closer to Eurasia, leading to the gradual closure of the Tethys, of which the Mediterranean Sea is the last vestige today. Tectonic movements create ocean currents that cause significant variations in the Earth's temperature. But overall, the climate remained warm and humid. As in the Triassic, the Jurassic saw no periods of glaciation. This remained the case throughout the Mesozoic. Many marine species took advantage of the opening of the oceans to spread across the planet. Marine reptiles and fish still dominate aquatic life. Reptiles include ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and pliosaurs, as well as marine crocodiles, such as Teleosauridae, and Metriorhynchidae, plesiosaurs are able to regulate their body temperature and can therefore swim in cold water. Today, their fossils can be found on every continent and at every latitude. Adult plesiosaurs can measure around 10 meters. Their long necks are composed of more than 30 cervical vertebrae. Agile with powerful jaws, they quickly became the feared predators of the seas and oceans all over the world. Stenopterygius, a member of the ichthyosaur family, resembles a dolphin in appearance and behavior. It swims in deep waters and feeds on fish and cephalopods. One of the special features of Stenopterygius is its multi-layered skin, dermis, epidermis, and a layer of fat to maintain body temperature. During the Jurassic, several groups of invertebrates appeared, including rudis and belemnites. Numerous species of bivalves developed. At the end of the Triassic, ammonites of the order Ammonotida became common, with many varied species. Here's a Hildoceras bifrons, a small predator from the ammonite family that uses its tentacles to catch its prey. Its shell is shaped like a flattened spiral. It is made up of small air-filled chambers which enable it to float. Females can measure between 95 and 175 millimeters, while males do not exceed 40 millimeters. This is also the period when plankton appears, in particular, radiolarians, fascinating unicellular microorganisms. Radiolarians belong to the zooplankton. Their skeletons have a complex, refined geometric shape that fascinates researchers. They appeared in part as a result of submarine volcanic eruptions and provide the silica necessary for the proliferation of green algae. The abundance of radiolarians in the Jurassic can certainly be explained by the upwelling of nutrient-rich deep cold waters. From 145 to 66 million years ago, the Cretaceous is the last period of the Mesozoic. Pangaea continues to fragment, leading to the appearance of the South Atlantic. The continents are not yet as we know them. Australia and Antarctica still form a single block, as do North America and Europe, linked by Greenland. India broke away from Madagascar and began its journey. Later, it became part of Laurasia to the north. After a cooling period in the early Cretaceous, the climate became temperate to warm and humid. By the end of the Cretaceous, average temperatures exceeded 18 degrees Celsius, or 64 degrees Fahrenheit. This compares with 15 degrees Celsius or 59 degrees Fahrenheit in 2023. There is 5 times more CO2 in the atmosphere than today. There is no ice at the poles. Ocean levels are at their highest, 300 meters or 1,000 feet higher than today. Vast areas are covered by warm, shallow water. Europe and Africa are archipelagos of islands. In the early Cretaceous, marine microorganisms abounded. Plankton, abundant in these tropical seas, provided a veritable food source for all marine organisms. All species were abundant. Echinoderms, such as sea urchins and starfish, sponges, invertebrates, such as corals and crustaceans, mollusks, fish. Increasingly, we find animals that resemble their modern form, such as lobsters and corals. Ammonites continued to diversify, some adopting highly complex, uncoiled forms. The Cretaceous saw the disappearance of certain marine reptiles, such as the Thalattosaucian crocodiles at 125 million years and the ichthyosaurs at 90 million years. Other reptiles, on the other hand, continue to thrive. At the top of the food chain, they benefit from the abundance of plankton, fish, and marine invertebrates. Such is the case of plesiosaurs, with representatives such as the emblematic Elasmosaurus. Elasmosaurus is none other than Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. He didn't live long. He became extinct during the crisis at the end of the Cretaceous. But this giant marine reptile, whose name literally means ribbon reptile, deserves a closer look. It measures 14 meters and weighs over 2 tons. Its neck is immense. It represents more than half its total length. It has 76 vertebrae. By way of comparison, we have just 7. It is often mistaken for a dinosaur, although it is not. Pliosaurs also continue to populate the Cretaceous seas. They are formidable predators with their powerful jaws, but they are not the most feared megapredators. That title goes to the mosasaur, often nicknamed the T-Rex of the seas. This giant reptile can reach 15 meters or 50 feet in length. Its teeth are robust, sharp, and curve backwards. Its teeth line the inside of its mouth right up to the roof of its mouth, preventing prey of any size from escaping. Mosasaurs eat a wide variety of foods, including fish, ammonites, and other marine reptiles. They'll eat anything they can get their hands on. Mega-predatory reptiles have to share their space and prey with giant sharks, such as Scaponorhynchus and Atudus, which can grow to 6 meters or 20 feet. Bony fish also appeared during the Cretaceous. Leadsictus is one of the most gigantic representatives. It can reach 15 meters or 50 feet in length. Fortunately for the mosasaur, it feeds solely on plankton and is therefore no real competitor. On the other hand, other large bony fish are formidable carnivores, such as Encodus, which can skewer its prey, fish and cephalopods, with its long saber-shaped teeth. During the Cretaceous period, around 100 million years ago, the first sea turtles appeared. Like marine reptiles, they can reach impressive dimensions. The Archelon species measures up to 3 meters or 10 feet in length, and up to 5 meters or 16 feet in wingspan. They closely resemble today's leatherback turtles. The 2 turtle families that exist today, Chelonidae and Demachylidae, already existed in the Upper Cretaceous. The end of the Cretaceous was marked by a major biological crisis, the Cretaceous-Paleocene extinction, also known as the extinction of the dinosaurs. This crisis wiped out all non-avian dinosaurs, as well as other terrestrial and marine species such as ammonites. The cause is still debated among scientists. Impact of a giant meteorite with the Earth? A particularly violent volcanic episode of which the Deccan Traps in India are a vestige? It was probably a combination of these 2 factors that caused a series of changes on a global scale. Earthquakes, clouds of ash and dust, cooling of the atmosphere, marine regression. A veritable chain reaction that led to the end of the Mesozoic era. We are now entering the Tertiary era, the Cenozoic, the era that will see the appearance of man. After the Cretaceous-Paleocene crisis, biodiversity will take time to become as rich as it was in the Mesozoic. The Cretaceous-Paleocene crisis triggered the collapse of calcium carbonate production by marine plankton. Many marine organisms depended on phytoplankton for food and survival. Coccolithophores, planktonic algae, mollusks including ammonites, rudis and freshwater snails all disappeared. All the animals that consumed them became extinct, or at least suffered massive losses. The disappearance of these small marine animals also had an impact on the megapredators that fed on them. The mosasaurs disappears. The animals that survive are the omnivores, those that feed on waste, and the semi-aquatic ones, which were able to adapt more easily to the upheaval in their environment. Some animals have developed impressive adaptive capacities. This is the case of crocodilians, which even today can feed on detritus and survive for long periods without food. The Cretaceous-Paleocene extinction was one of the most destructive mass extinctions in Earth's history. Let's see how marine biodiversity regenerated after this crisis. We enter the first period of the Cenozoic, the Paleocene. This period lasted from 65 to 53 million years ago. Pangaea finishes breaking up. The North Atlantic now separates Greenland from the European continent. Australia and Antarctica split into two continental blocks. In America, the 3,500-kilometer-long Rocky Mountains are formed. The climate is colder than in the Cretaceous, but still warmer and more humid than today. The seasons are not very marked. A subtropical climate extends across the globe, including Alaska, where fossils of tropical flora have been found. Higher rainfall all year round allows the development of denser forests, as well as mangroves on the Australian continent. The Paleocene remains the warmest period of the entire Tertiary era. Sea levels are very high. Almost all of Europe is submerged. Under the ocean, mollusks diversified, occupying the ecological niches occupied by ammonites in the Mesozoic. Teleost fish, part of the ray-finned fish class, took advantage of the Cretaceous-Paleocene crisis and replaced marine reptiles in the oceans. Today, they represent 99.8% of all fish species and almost half of all vertebrate species. These fish are distinguished by their radiating fins, jaws, and scale-covered skin. They capture their prey by sucking it in. Unlike teleost fishes, cartilaginous fishes, i.e. rays and sharks, were unable to take advantage of the crisis and did not diversify to the same extent. The Paleocene was also marked by the arrival of underwater mammals. Some groups of land mammals adapted to the marine environment. Although it may seem astonishing to you, today's cetaceans originate from the group of ungulates known as artiodactyls, i.e. pigs, camels, sheep. The whale's closest relative is the hippopotamus. Unlike the marine reptiles that became extinct, the crocodiliforms group was little affected by the Cretaceous-Paleocene crisis. Today, only 24 crocodilian species remain from this large group, distributed exclusively in the intertropical zones of the globe, and with very similar morphologies. In the Paleocene, however, the crocodiliforms group was much larger and more diverse. Crocodiliforms appeared at the end of the Triassic period, occupying all terrestrial and marine environments. At the end of the Cretaceous, they divided into three groups: the Nautasuchians, the Tethasuchians, and the Eusuchians. All three groups lived through the Cretaceous-Paleocene crisis. The Nautasuchians were essentially terrestrial, and their morphology was far removed from that of today's crocodilians. They had long, slender limbs, a compact skull, and a short, high snout. It is likely that they fed exclusively on plants. In contrast, the Tethasuchians were exclusively aquatic. One branch of the Tethasuchians, the Dirasauridae, underwent a veritable explosion in the Paleocene, whereas it was little represented before the crisis. Today's crocodiles belong to the third group, the Eusuchians. Eusuchians were already present in the Cretaceous and continued to diversify after the crisis. The survival of the crocodiliforms can be explained by the fact that they also evolved in river environments, which suffered less from the crisis than the marine environment. The end of the Paleocene was marked by a brief, particularly warm episode, the thermal maximum of the recent Paleocene. In just 10,000 years, global surface temperature rose to an average of 30 degrees Celsius, or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Forests became dense rainforests, and some marine animal species cannot survive. This is the case, for example, of marine microplankton and benthic foraminifera. This climatic crisis causes the release of large quantities of methane into the atmosphere, a gas with a very strong greenhouse effect. It marks the transition to the next period, the Eocene. The Eocene lasted from 56 to 34 million years ago. On every continent, this period was marked by the emergence of the first modern mammals. This is what gave the Eocene its name, literally meaning new dawn. During this period, the continents continued to drift apart. India continued to move away from Africa, and its contact with Asia gave rise to the Himalayas. Eocene oceans are warm, fish abound. Two major fossil sites have enabled us to learn more about the underwater fauna of this period: Monte Bolca near Verona and the Green River Formation in the USA. Dipole mistus and mean rhombia are examples of fish fossils found at these sites, as is the marine snake Archaeophis proavis. This period saw the appearance of the first, Carcharhiniforms, an order of sharks that today numbers over 270 species. The first marine mammals also appeared, including the first whales. Basilosaurus is one of the oldest ancestors of the whale. Its distinctive feature is a dentition composed of two types of teeth, whereas today's toothed cetaceans such as dolphins, killer whales, and sperm whales have only conical teeth. Its hind limbs are very small, but still bear the marks of its evolution from terrestrial mammals. They consist of a pelvis, femurs, tibias, and foot bones. By comparison, today's whales have only a vestige of a pelvis as a hind limb. Other mammals managed to adapt to aquatic life, forming a second group, the Sirenians. This group includes the ancestors of today's dugongs and manatees. These aquatic mammals are herbivores. They live mainly in tropical zones and in the southern hemisphere, where they graze on aquatic grasses. Their diversity declined steadily after the Eocene. Today, only one species of dugong and 3 to 4 species of manatee remain from this group of aquatic mammals. The end of the Eocene is marked by rapid cooling, certainly caused by meteorite impacts. Global temperature dropped by 6 degrees Celsius or 11 degrees Fahrenheit in around 500,000 years. This cooling had several consequences. On the Antarctic continent, a polar ice cap formed. It is still there today. This icy continent became isolated. The sea level dropped by more than 50 meters, or 165 feet. This change in environment led to a mass extinction event known as the Great Divide. This will mainly affect terrestrial species. But that's not to say that the Great Divide had no impact on aquatic fauna. Crocodilians and anurans, a group of amphibians, are particularly affected by this extinction. The Oligocene stretches from 34 to 23 million years ago. Its name refers to the rarity of new modern mammals, in contrast to the Eocene period. At the beginning of the Oligocene, the climate became more arid. Forest environments were replaced by open savanna-type habitats. During this period, continental drift continued. They are now closer to their present position. Whether on continents or under the sea, there are few new forms of modern animals. However, many primitive species have become extinct. On the whole, land and sea fauna began to resemble the fauna we know today. Europe undergoes a mass extinction. European fauna is replaced by immigrant fauna from Asia. South America, isolated from the other continents, developed a very distinctive fauna. As for marine fauna, it continues to evolve. Vertebrates dominated the seas. The Oligocene saw the appearance of toothed cetaceans and baleen whales. Carcharhiniforms continue to diversify. Although there are few fossils of marine animals from this period, scientists believe that virtually all modern mammal families are now established. From 23 million years ago, we enter the Miocene. This period lasted until 5 million years ago and saw the appearance of the first hominids. In 2001, a team of paleoanthropologists in Chad discovered the fossil remains of the oldest known hominin, Tomai. These fossils have been dated at 7 million years. This hominin was bipedal, as confirmed by the discovery of a femur and the anatomy of its skull. With arms similar to those of chimpanzees, Tomai was comfortable climbing trees, but that doesn't mean he did it all the time. A bit like swimming, for example. During the first half of the Miocene, the Earth warms up until it reaches what is known as a climatic optimum. The Miocene climatic optimum lasted between 16.9 and 14.7 million years. The configuration of the continents is roughly similar to today's, a fact worth bearing in mind as it impacts the pattern of ocean currents and therefore the global climate. During the Miocene climatic optimum, all continents except Antarctica were covered by vast rainforests. The high northern latitudes were warmed by oceanic circulation, allowing forests to establish in areas that were usually icy. As the ice melted, the extensive forests, which normally reflected the sun's rays with their white color, reinforced global warming. These changes are conducive to the expansion of African fauna, particularly hominids. In the second half of the Miocene, from 14.5 million years ago, the climate began to cool. At the end of the Miocene, temperatures drop and the climate becomes drier. Australia became semi-arid. Kelp proliferates under the oceans. This brown algae provides a choice food source for many species, including sea otters, fish, and invertebrates. These species can thus continue to develop and diversify. Super predators appear, with giant sharks 2 or even 3 times the size of today's white sharks. Carchorocles chubatensis can reach up to 12 meters or 43 feet in length. It belongs to the Otodontidae class, nicknamed the big-toothed shark class. It certainly fed on fish, but also on sea turtles, cetaceans, and sirenians. Even more impressive than Carchorocles chubatensis, the megalodon can reach up to 15 meters or 50 feet. Its name means big tooth. Long considered a close relative of the great white shark, it is now classified in the Otodontidae family, like Carcharodontes chubatensis. This family, now extinct, diverged from that of the great white shark much earlier, around the beginning of the Cretaceous. The megalodon is one of the largest and most powerful predators that ever lived. But as researchers have only found fragments of it, its size remains uncertain, nor are we sure of its appearance. It could have resembled a great white shark, a whale shark, a basking shark, or a bull shark. Estimates suggest that it was more slender than the great white shark. Its thick, robust teeth enabled it to catch its prey and break their bones. It could feed on cetaceans, sea turtles, and pinnipeds, the ancestors of today's walruses. Juveniles fed on fish and small whales. These giant sharks compete with large predatory cetaceans, such as the ancestors of today's killer whale, or the famous leviathan, a species of sperm whale that hunted large cetaceans, seals, schools of fish, and squid. Since sharks prefer warm waters, the cooling of the late Miocene contributed to their decline, as did the reduction in baleen whale diversity. While giant sharks declined in the late Miocene and subsequent periods, baleen whales continued to grow to their current size. The bowhead whale, for example, can measure up to 18 meters in length. During the Miocene, despite the presence of these giant predators, cetaceans diversified. Sperm whales appeared. Archaeoceti, cetacean mammals that disappeared before the Miocene, were replaced by new species of dolphin, whale, and porpoise. Miocene waters also saw the arrival of large crabs, such as Archaeogerion, which could grow to over 30 centimeters or 12 inches, excluding antennae and legs. From the Miocene to the present day, underwater life will continue to alternate between periods of intense diversification and biological extinctions. There will be no more major mass extinctions. The last major biological crisis was the Cretaceous-Paleocene crisis, which caused the disappearance of all non-avian dinosaurs on the continents and large reptiles under the seas. However, according to researchers, another minor crisis in marine biodiversity occurred 2 to 3 million years ago at the end of the Pliocene. This crisis led to the extinction of a third of the marine megafauna. 55% of marine mammals became extinct, along with 43% of turtles, 35% of seabirds, and 9% of sharks. The marine fauna of more recent times was therefore also fragile in the face of environmental change. From the explosion of Cambrian biodiversity to the Permian Triassic crisis, which caused the disappearance of over 90% of terrestrial and marine species, and from the arrival of giant reptiles in the seas to their replacement at the top of the food chain by giant sharks, you have had the opportunity to get to know species that are very different from those that populate our seas today, but without which our fish, cetaceans, and corals would not be the same. Since the division of Pangaea, the climate has become warm and humid, and vegetation has developed abundantly. Lush green expanses cover a large part of the continents. This vegetation benefits herbivorous animals enormously. They grow, diversify, and become very numerous. As their appetite increases, so does their size. The Jurassic is known as the golden age of the great sauropod dinosaurs. The famous Diplodocus, the Brachiosaurus, and the extraordinary Stegosaurus populate the Earth's surface. The Brachiosaurus is a quadrupedal dinosaur with longer limbs at the front than at the back. Its femur alone is larger than a man's, measuring over 2 meters or 7 feet. Its immensely long neck is made up of a dozen vertebrae, each measuring up to 70 centimeters or 28 inches. It is particularly well suited to grazing on the leaves of tall plants. Its head can tower 13 meters or 43 feet above the ground, and its mass is around 20 tons. Brachiosaurus has crenulated teeth, whose flattened shape is particularly well suited to crushing plants. Brachiosaurs are social animals living in herds. These enormous herbivores gathered in the same place are not without displeasing carnivorous predators. While these predators were modest in size in the Triassic, they reached extraordinary dimensions in the Jurassic. The Allosaurus, a carnivorous theropod, could measure up to 12 meters or 40 feet from head to tail, and up to 4 meters or 13 feet in height. The name Allosaurus literally means strange lizard, due to the bumps on its skull. Thanks to its powerful muscles, it can run at speeds of between 30 and 55 kilometers per hour, 34 miles per hour. Its robust limbs are clearly adapted to hunting. It has very powerful claws, and the structure of its tail enables it to maintain balance in relation to its total body weight. Although it can't open its mouth wide, a muscle at the back of its skull gives it the strength to sink its teeth into its prey. The Allosaurus is a formidable predator. A new fauna now colonizes the air. Until now, only flying insects have roamed the skies. Now, many reptiles have joined them and are discovering the advantages of this precious food source. Dimorphodon and Rhamphorhynchus are true flying predators. Dimorphodon is a flying animal with an average length of 1 meter and a wingspan of 1.45 meters or 5 feet. Its body structure is fairly primitive, with a very small skull and short wings. The first phalanx of its wing finger is only slightly longer than its lower arm. Its neck, though small, is very flexible. Its wings, proportionately short in relation to its body, make it a poor flyer. As a result, it flies for short periods, as it is unable to travel long distances. A discreet little animal, it takes advantage of the abundance of vegetation. He's trying to make his way through all the clutter. It's Parvoraptor, a genus of snake comprising just one species. Parvoraptor estesi. 15 centimeters or 6 inches long, it has vestigial limbs showing that it was still in a transitional phase between lizards and snakes. In the seas, marine reptiles which had appeared in the previous period reign supreme. They include ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and pliosaurs. Plesiosaurs are large aquatic reptiles. Their long necks and 4 fins enabled them to paddle in oceans, lakes, rivers, and swamps during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. The term plesiosaur also includes pliosaurs. Their bodies are more hydrodynamic, with larger heads and shorter necks. The largest plesiosaurs, such as Liopleurodon, are as fearsome as the great white shark. Thanks to its gustatory and visual senses, Liopleurodon locates its prey by swimming with its mouth open. Liopleurodon are well adapted to their environment. Its legs enable it to move swiftly through the water at great depths. Its front flippers push the water backwards, enabling it to propel itself. Plesiosaurs and pliosaurs, although they have marine lifestyles, are primarily lizards and must regularly come to the surface to breathe. Pliosaurs were at the top of the food chain at first, only to be supplanted by mosasaurs a little later. Ichthyosaurs are diapsid marine reptiles. They lived in the Triassic and Jurassic periods and disappeared at the beginning of the Cretaceous. They are relatively modest in size, except for some specimens, such as Shonosaurus, which reached up to 35 meters or 115 feet in length. Their powerful fins enable them to travel at speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour or 25 miles per hour. They feed on fish, ammonites, and belemnites, thanks to a long snout with sharp teeth. They have the morphology of today's dolphins and behave like them in that they can descend to great depths and leap back to the surface. Ichthyosaurs give birth to live, ready-to-swim young, rather than eggs, which is an advantage for their survival. Alongside these marine reptiles, cartilaginous fish developed, taking on the morphology of today's sharks. Crocodilians also evolved from archosaurs, just like dinosaurs. Several lineages of dinosaurs appeared during the Jurassic, surviving for the next 150 million years. The most important development was the appearance of the first birds. The Jurassic ended, and a new chapter in Earth's history began, the Cretaceous, during which snakes really developed and diversified. In the Cretaceous, Pangaea is now divided into Laurasia to the north and Gondwana to the south. Laurasia also split into two parts. The North Atlantic Ocean appears, and the southeastern part is about to open up. Seen from the sky, the Earth begins to look somewhat familiar. The Earth still has no ice caps. The climate is generally warm. Sea levels are about 200 meters or 660 feet higher than they are today. Flora and fauna continue to evolve. Dinosaurs are the dominant animal group with the largest body sizes. They diversify and new groups appear, while others become extinct. Among them, the Tyrannosaurus appeared at the very end of the period. More commonly known as the T-Rex, this giant of 4 meters or 13 feet in height and 12 meters or 40 feet in length could weigh up to 7 tons. This bipedal super predator was at the top of the food chain, feeding on large herbivores. That's not going to stop the snakes from getting bigger and bigger in this environment that's so favorable to them. Flowering plants, the angiosperms, make their appearance. Alongside ferns and conifers, they will become dominant by the end of the period, thanks to insects. The vegetation is very welcoming to snakes, whose evolution is already underway at this time. Their bodies are already long and sinuous. Most still have reduced limbs, like Najash rheonegrina, but some have already lost them, like Deinonychia patagonica. Snakes now come in a multitude of forms, exploiting a variety of ecological niches. This evolution will also enable them to reach larger sizes. Deinonychia patagonica is the first known legless snake. It rubbed shoulders with the great dinosaurs that dominated the world at the time. It has no limbs, no shoulder girdle, and no pelvic girdle. This relatively large predator reaches up to 2 meters or 7 feet in length. The shape of its skull is reminiscent of that of the boidae and suggests that it was capable of consuming large prey. Deinonychia patagonica lives in desert environments. It is a terrestrial animal. This snake is closely related to the original ancestor of the crowned snake clade. Extensive study of its inner ear has demonstrated that it is equipped to dig burrows and receive low-frequency ground vibrations to detect predators and capture prey. Consequently, it is not equipped for aquatic life. There are significant differences between the vestibules of terrestrial burrowing specialists, those of non-burrowing terrestrial generalists, and those of aquatic forms. The vestibule of marine snakes and lizards has shrunk to almost nothing. In burrowing species, on the other hand, the vestibule is inflated like a balloon to improve hearing performance in subterranean environments. This trend is confirmed in all burrowers. The vestibule of Deinonychia patagonica is large and has the same balloon-like shape as those of today's burrowing snakes. It is almost identical to that of Xenopeltis, a type of burrowing snake from Southeast Asia that feeds on small rodents and other small snakes. Like Xenopeltis, Deinonychia patagonica hunts on the surface and burrows into soft ground for shelter. It is a carnivorous snake, feeding mainly on animal prey. Its extensible jaws and teeth are designed for grasping and ingesting animal prey. Because it lacks limbs, Deinonychia patagonica crawls and gains access to burrows and shelters of small vertebrates, such as other reptiles, small mammals, birds, and even fish. Its relatively large size enables it to hunt large prey. Deinonychia patagonica is a genus of primitive snakes closely related to the ancestor of today's snakes. It is not one of the first lineages to separate from the lizards, like Najash rheonegrina. Like many Cretaceous snakes, Najash rheonegrina has small bony hind limbs extending from the hip to the ankle. It moves easily on land thanks to its 2 legs, which also serve to hold on to its partner during mating. This snake has characteristics that our modern snakes no longer possess. The bone below the orbit has the same shape, position, and connections as the jugal bone of most lizards. This lower part of the jugal bone was therefore lost over the course of snake evolution to form a rod-shaped bone. The morphology of Najash rheonegrina bears a familiar resemblance to that of modern-day lizard species, such as the Komodo dragon. It has a massive mouth, head, and body. But other representatives of the lizard-snake transition also roamed the Earth in the Cretaceous. Coniophis precedens is one of the oldest known fossil snakes. It lived 65 to 70 million years ago. It is one of the few fossils to represent the transition from snakes to their lizard cousins. Coniophis precedens lives in a floodplain environment and lacks adaptations for aquatic locomotion. This discovery suggests that creeping reptiles are terrestrial rather than aquatic in origin. It is small in stature, small in legs, and has a spine that reveals burrowing characteristics. Its jaws are more rigid and articulated than those of its modern cousins, but should already have enabled it to swallow large prey. It was at the end of the Cretaceous period that the Boidae appeared, dominating the world of snakes, especially in Europe and North America. Some of them reached record sizes for snakes. The Matsoidae are a family of giant snakes that can measure over 10 meters or 33 feet. Matsoid snakes are constrictors that resemble modern pythons and boas. Their jaw structure, however, is more primitive and much less suited to swallowing large prey. Members of this family have specific characteristics, such as the presence of a pituitary gland in the anterior part of the trunk, or the fact that the middle and posterior vertebrae of the trunk have a moderately or well-developed hemal keel. Among the Matsoidae, during the Cretaceous period, we find the genus Matsoia. It is represented by several species, the largest of which measures 10 meters or 33 feet in length. It's not just on Earth that snakes reach giant sizes. Another family related to the Boidae, the Paleophidae, represented by Paleophis, also reaches lengths of around 10 meters. These are all aquatic snakes that populate the Eocene seas. The smallest specimens of this family measured around 1 meter in length. Studies of Paleophis vertebrae reveal a high degree of vascularization. This suggests that the specimens had a much faster metabolism and growth rate than modern snakes. Eupodophis is a genus of marine snake that lived around 90 million years ago. It is rather modest in size, measuring 85 centimeters or 34 inches long, but has 2 small legs at the back, making it a transitional specimen between lizards and limbless snakes. The known species is called Eupodophis discoense. Its body ends in a short paddle-shaped tail. Its vertebrae and ribs are thickened as a result of its aquatic lifestyle. The pelvic bones are small and weakly attached to each other. Eupodophis discoense has hind limbs that, although small, are anatomically comparable to those of modern land lizards. These marine snakes share the aquatic environment with other marine reptiles. While the ichthyosaurs are becoming extinct, as yet unexplained, a new group is emerging, the mosasaurids. The mosasaur was a marine reptile that dominated the oceans at the end of the Cretaceous. With its crocodile-like appearance, it boasts heavy oval jaws. It can reach lengths of around 15 meters or 50 feet. Despite its large eyes, it has poor vision and olfactory senses. It has sharp teeth that enable it to cut up its prey so that it can eat it more easily, since its slender jaw means it can't swallow it all at once. Its scales are smooth and dark, and it has a fin at the end of its tail. In the air, species get bigger and bigger and are inexorably outcompeted by the first birds. Even on land, the race for gigantism is still on, and snakes, though massive, must be wary of new predators in the air. The skies are now dominated by animals with wingspans of up to 15 meters or 50 feet. Such as the Quetzalcoatlus. Quetzalcoatlus cohabitated with dinosaurs and is the largest flying creature ever to have existed. Its name literally means feathered serpent. This type of flying reptile belongs to the pterosaur group. Because of its size, it can be compared to a giraffe when on the ground. It averages 11 meters or 36 feet in length and weighs up to 200 kilograms or 440 pounds. The Quetzalcoatlus has two very pronounced pointed wings, giving it speed when it flies. Another advantage is that its weight is relatively low compared with its size, making it easier to climb into the sky despite its gigantic size. It has a long neck made up of numerous vertebrae, all interlocking with the folds of its wings. Its beak is slender, straight, and elongated. Because of its size, it is probably capable of hunting large prey, such as large fish, reptiles, birds, and perhaps even small dinosaurs or dead animal carcasses. Its long jaw and conical teeth suggest that it could catch and swallow whole prey in flight or on the ground. The Cretaceous period came to an end with the fifth and last of the mass extinctions. The theory most widely accepted by scientists is that of a meteorite impact preceding major volcanic eruptions at the Trap, Deccan, in present-day India. A celestial body from outer space crashed to Earth. Its diameter, estimated at around 10 kilometers, combined with the speed of the impact, caused an immeasurable explosion. Everything was vaporized for hundreds of kilometers at the very second of impact. Neither flora nor fauna were spared. Debris was propelled into the atmosphere and fell back to Earth, sparking numerous fires. The dust and gases emitted combine with water to produce acid rain, devastating everything it touches. In the seas, the plankton that form the basis of the food chain are wiped out. Dust in the atmosphere blocks out sunlight, plunging the Earth into a permanent night. As a result, temperatures plummet. Survivors are small animals with less need for food. The animals try to adapt as best they can to the new environment created by the catastrophe. Temperatures drop. Reptiles, which are cold-blooded animals, prolong their fasting and manage to survive. Other small omnivorous animals manage to adapt to the catastrophe and underwent a major evolutionary radiation: mammals. A new era began, the Paleogene, when the Cretaceous tertiary extinction had wiped out the species that had previously dominated the planet. A new age begins, the age of mammals, but not only. The surviving fauna will spread and diversify. Mammals that had hitherto lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs will become the planet's dominant group. The non-avian dinosaurs have all disappeared. Avian dinosaurs will continue to evolve and become the birds we know today. Flying reptiles and marine reptiles are no more. In the oceans, the situation is catastrophic. The majority of large predators have not survived, and fish will be able to take advantage of the ecological niches left vacant. The great reptiles have disappeared, but at the same time, other animals have managed to survive. Turtles, lizards, snakes, and crocodiles continue to evolve more serenely. How did snakes survive? The strength of snakes in this apocalyptic environment is their ability to survive without food for periods of up to a full year. At the same time, most species in the food chain are disappearing. Snakes are adept at hunting in the dark, which came in handy when the Earth was hit by a long, cold winter, as the sun was no longer able to penetrate the atmosphere. Snakes living underground in the forest or in water are the ones that fare best. Once the environment calms down, snakes emerge from their shelters and, to their great delight, have far fewer adversaries to contend with. They survive and spread all over the world. The impact of the meteorite had consequences for the climate. The clouds of ash and particles that spread through the atmosphere on impact are said to have spread across the entire planet, enveloping parts of the Earth in total darkness for over 700 days. Temperatures dropped considerably for several decades, from an average of 30 degrees Celsius, or 86 degrees Fahrenheit before the impact, to 3 degrees Celsius, or 37 degrees Fahrenheit, in the years that followed. Then, over the next 1,000 years, the climate becomes tropical again. Temperatures rise again. The Earth now has many land masses. North America and Africa gradually saw their inland seas shrink. Shoals emerge and continental surfaces expand. India moves northwards, breaking away from Madagascar. Australia breaks away from Antarctica. Flowering plants cover continental surfaces. Tall trees such as redwoods now grow to form lush forests. This vegetation is a veritable paradise for animals. It offers shelter and food. In the oceans, the great marine reptiles are no more, and the cartilaginous fish, known as chondrichthyans, to which sharks belong, become true predators over the following millions of years. The actinopterygian, ray-finned fish multiplied to become the most numerous. During the Paleocene and Eocene, the Earth underwent a widespread warming episode. Surface water temperatures approached 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit at low latitudes, and 17 degrees Celsius or 63 degrees Fahrenheit near Antarctica. In addition to this generalized warming, a crisis occurred during the transition from the Paleocene to the Eocene, 56 million years ago. A hyperthermal episode occurred, known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. This event could be explained by a strong release of methane into the atmosphere, caused by the thermal destabilization of methane hydrates present in marine sediments. The temperature of the deep ocean rose by 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, an increase of 11 degrees Fahrenheit. The Arctic zone reaches temperatures in excess of 20 degrees Celsius, or 68 degrees Fahrenheit, to the extent that tropical species of phytoplankton thrive there. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum caused a major disruption of the carbon cycle. A biological crisis ensued, leading to the extinction of 30 to 50% of the microorganisms living on the ocean floor. However, other organisms also benefited. As temperatures rise, the environment changes completely. Pollen fossils of ferns and palms were discovered during drilling at a depth of 1 kilometer in Antarctica, along with fossils of crocodile ancestors. Fossils corresponding to a mangrove forest also remain at today's North Pole. The main orders of modern mammals appear at this time, but it was the cold-blooded reptiles that most benefited from this warming. Snakes need high temperatures to remain active. Average temperatures of between 30 and 34 degrees Celsius, or 86 degrees Fahrenheit, combined with a humid tropical environment, have enabled some snakes to reach extraordinary dimensions. Although they were already reaching impressive sizes by the end of the Cretaceous, the absence of oversized dinosaurs allowed them to continue to develop and grow even larger. One of the most famous genera of giant snakes from this period is Titanoboa. Its name literally translates as Titanic boa. The only known species today is Titanoboa cerrejonensis. Titanoboa belongs to the Boidae family, which consists of carnivorous snake builders found mainly in tropical zones. These include boas and anacondas. Titanoboa cerrejonensis was discovered in 2002 when scientists on an expedition to the Cerrejón coal mines in La Guajira, Colombia, discovered immense thoracic vertebrae and ribs. Other fossils were subsequently unearthed, for a total of 186 fossils, representing 30 individuals. Research continued for 2 years, and other giant reptile fossils from turtles and crocodilians were also found. All date from the Paleocene epoch, around 60 million years ago, just after the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction. The excavated fossils are being transported to the Florida Museum of Natural History for study by a team of international scientists. The vertebrae and ribs discovered belong to a new giant boidian named Titanoboa cerrejonensis. In 2011, a second expedition will be carried out in the same region to further investigate Titanoboa. 3 disarticulated skulls and parts of the mandible associated with the partial axial skeletons were discovered. Titanoboa is one of the few known fossil snakes with cranial material in good condition. True colossuses roamed the earth as giant snakes millions of years ago. But what did these giant creatures look like? And in what context did these snakes evolve? How did they evolve to such massive proportions? Titanoboa is the largest known snake in the fossil record. In boids, the increase in body size is due to larger vertebrae rather than an increase in the number of bones making up the skeleton. Titanoboa reaches a height of just over 14 meters, or 46 feet, with a diameter of 80 centimeters or 31 inches. It weighed around 1,500 kilograms, or 3,300 pounds, 4 times heavier than today's largest snake. Its skull measures 40 centimeters or 16 inches, and a modern man could stand upright in its open mouth. Titanoboa far exceeds the largest snakes on Earth today, from the green anaconda to the reticulated python, and even Gigantophis. Several specimens of this colossal size have been found, confirming that Titanoboa regularly reaches these gigantic proportions. Snakes, whether Paleocene or modern day, are poikilotherms. They have no control over their body temperature, which varies according to the temperature of their environment. This lack of control over internal temperature prevents snakes from being active during cold periods, as they conserve energy. Their size is limited and influenced by the outside temperature. When the temperature is too low, the animal has a slow metabolism that cannot support a body that is too large. During the Paleocene, in Colombia, where Titanoboa fossils were found, the temperature reached between 30 and 34 degrees Celsius, or 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Titanoboa is so enormous that it cannot support its own weight on land. It is an aquatic animal. It lives close to fast-flowing rivers, where freshwater turtles and crocodiles make up a large part of its diet. It thrives in the equatorial rainforest, where it can find plenty of food. One of Titanoboa's famous meals is Sarajonosuchus. This cousin of the crocodile is one of the giant snake's favorite prey. Its fossil has also been found in the Cerrejón Formation in Colombia, where Titanoboa's remains were found. Unlike Titanoboa, Sarajonosuchus is a small specimen. It is a crocodiliform that belongs to the group of modern-day crocodilians. Like Titanoboa, it thrives in a neotropical equatorial forest environment. While the evolution of reptiles tends toward gigantism, this one sticks to a rather reduced size. What's more, unlike its crocodile cousins with their long claw-like snouts, specialized in catching prey, Sarajonosuchus has a short, broad snout. Its diet consists mainly of amphibians, small reptiles, and mammals. Some scientists believe it is adapted by tapping into food sources that don't attract the other giant species it comes into contact with. Sarajonosuchus is easy prey because of its small size, and it must also beware of Carboniferous. This giant freshwater turtle measures around 2.5 meters or 8 feet in length, including 1.8 meters or 6 feet for its carapace alone. Carboniferous has an omnivorous diet. Its strong jaws and imposing size enable it to attack medium-sized crocodiles. While Titanoboa made its home in the part of the world that corresponds to present-day Colombia, giant snakes of the Madsoidae family remain on other continents. Gigantophis gastini is similar to a giant anaconda. This snake grows to over 10 meters or 33 feet and possesses considerable strength. Until the discovery of Titanoboa, Gigantophis gestini was considered the largest snake ever to have existed on Earth. Its shape and vertebrae are primitive. It lives near waterways and in areas of lush vegetation. It feeds on small mammals, but its size also enables it to attack large animals, such as the ancestors of elephants, the Moratherium. Although it looks rather like today's tapirs, the Moratherium is a mammal that belongs to the elephant group, as it shares many common anatomical features. The Moratherium measures around 3 meters or 10 feet in length and weighs around 400 kilograms or 880 pounds. It is smaller than today's elephants and occupies ecological niches currently taken by the hippopotamus, such as swamps and rivers. Moratherium feeds on vegetation. It does not have a trunk comparable to that of the elephant, but instead has a wide, flexible upper lip, enabling it to grasp hard-to-reach vegetation. Wanambi is a genus of large snake that lived in Australia during the Pleistocene. It measures between 5 and 6 meters, or 20 feet long, and has a small head. It stays close to water holes to catch its prey by surprise when it comes to drink. It then kills them by constriction, which means it wraps itself around its prey and suffocates them to death. Alongside him, Yarlungar also lives in Australia. This large predator used to grow up to 6 meters in length. It operates much like its sidekick, Wanambi, standing close to water holes to attack its prey and killing them by constriction. Other giants live alongside Wanambi and Yarlungar. Megalania prissa is a giant monitor that lives in Australia. It thrives in warm, dry areas, grasslands, savannas, and lowland rainforests. Its dimensions are impressive. It reaches lengths of 5 to 7 meters, or 23 feet, and weighs over a ton. It is one of the super predators of our time. Its morphology is reminiscent of today's Komodo dragon, only more massive. It wears a dark green, gray, or black color to remain inconspicuous in its environment and discreetly approach its prey. Its skin is reinforced with plates of small bones called osteoderms, forming a kind of chain mail. Its name has a Greek meaning gigantic wanderer. Thanks to its large size, it is not afraid to attack equally oversized prey. It has a long tail, which it can use in its attacks. Its many teeth and long curved claws at the end of its legs make it a formidable opponent. Giant snakes, as they appeared in earlier eras, no longer exist in our modern world. The circumstances of their disappearance remain a mystery. But what we do know is that while they may have some major advantages, their main weakness is their dependence on the climate. These creatures are dependent on the liquid element, ambient humidity, and high temperatures prevailing on Earth at the time. As soon as cooling and drying affect their environment, these giants are condemned to extinction. This extreme dependence on their environment and their low adaptive flexibility compared to other species proved fatal. However, the snake suborder has not disappeared altogether. They are just smaller in size. Even if a few specimens stand out for their length or weight, they don't surpass our famous Titanoboa. In today's world, 3 snakes stand out for their above-average length and weight. The reticulated python is a snake that lives in Southeast Asia. It is not only the world's largest snake, but also the longest land animal. It can reach up to 10 meters or 33 feet and weigh up to 140 kilograms or 310 pounds. It thrives in tropical rainforests and swamps. The reticulated python is an excellent swimmer that also enjoys aquatic areas. It is capable of eating large animals such as monkeys or wild pigs, but is also content with small mammals such as rabbits or rats or birds. Just behind the reticulated python, on the podium of longest snakes, comes the green anaconda at 8.5 meters or 28 feet in length. Despite its second place, it has nothing to envy the reticulated python, since it surpasses it in weight and can reach up to 200 kilograms or 440 pounds. Female specimens are heavier than males. The green anaconda is a constrictor snake with a predominantly aquatic lifestyle. It can remain in the water for 10 to 20 minutes without breathing. It hunts at night, leaving only its eyes and nostrils above the surface of the water. It thrives in the Amazon rainforest, climbing from tree to tree as the need arises. It is capable of swallowing large mammals such as tapirs and goats. The Saba python is Africa's largest snake. It reaches up to 7.5 meters or 25 feet in length and weighs around 100 kilograms or 220 pounds. It thrives in rocky areas and savannas, but also in aquatic environments. Like the reticulated python and the green anaconda, it feeds on both small and large mammals. It may even prey on hyenas or small crocodiles. Life on Earth never ceases to reinvent itself, to invent new scenarios and to surprise us. When a specimen is affected by gigantism and reaches abnormally large dimensions compared to its congeners or close relatives on the evolutionary tree, man always tries to understand why. Discoveries of giant snakes, like Titanoboa, are having a significant impact on research, contributing to our understanding of Earth's history. They provide valuable information about past biodiversity and demonstrate the astonishing plurality of life forms that may have existed in previous geological eras. These discoveries have provided even more information for the study of the evolution of these singular animals, leading to a global understanding of the origin and evolution of modern snakes. What's more, the discovery of fossils is always an invaluable source of data, providing new insights into the environmental conditions of the time. Scientists now know more about the food chains of the past, including these giant snakes as major predators in their ecosystems. Their existence strongly influenced the populations of other species that lived in the same regions as them. Giant snakes are still a source of fascination today. Their legacy is present in popular culture, and their study is important in understanding the history of the Earth. They play a fascinating role in myths and legends. Generally speaking, the morphological and biological characteristics of snakes give them a supernatural character, Even though they have no limbs, they are able to move quickly. They can be found on land, in trees, or in water. They can emerge at any time from underground hiding places. They swallow their prey in a single gulp and can inflict venomous bites. Snakes are very different from humans and other animals, so it's only natural that humans should classify them as strange and supernatural creatures. Would this not also be a reminder of nature's ability to fashion creatures as remarkable as they are mysterious?